This is the story of George, a cat whose behavioral challenges were so severe that even my veterinarian once remarked that many people might not have kept him alive. George was a rescue cat. I adopted him when he was 6 years old, and by that time he had already lived with 4 different owners. That history alone suggested a life filled with instability, constant change, and very little security. The journey home after I adopted him lasted nearly 2 hours, and he cried almost non-stop the entire way. He was frightened, overwhelmed, and deeply anxious. Nothing seemed capable of calming him. As time passed, I learned more about his background. His first owner had several large dogs that reportedly played very rough with him. What I wasn't prepared for was how intensely attached and aggressive George could become once he formed a bond with someone.
George, good morning. Would you like your breakfast, my baby? Yes, of course you would. Yeah. So somebody had...
He remains the only cat I have ever known who would actively chase and attack people. One of his biggest triggers was the possibility of being left alone. Whenever he saw me reaching for my coat, he would often react aggressively because he assumed I was about to leave. What made George difficult to understand was the contradiction in his behavior. He was extremely attached to me, yet also highly reactive and anxious. His aggression wasn't rooted in malice. It was driven by fear, insecurity, and an overwhelming need for reassurance.
George. Oh my God, that's cute! George. Sit. George.
Living with him during those early days was challenging. My arms and hands were constantly covered in scratches, and there were times when helping him felt exhausting. I often struggled to find ways to support him without unintentionally making his behavior worse. Eventually, I changed my approach. Rather than responding emotionally to every outburst, I began treating behavioral training more systematically. My experience fostering animals and teaching violin had taught me the value of patience, consistency, and positive reinforcement. Those same principles proved useful with George. Over time, I learned to recognize the signs that he was becoming overstimulated. When that happened, I would calmly remove him from the situation and give him a brief timeout in a separate room. There was no punishment, anger, or yelling involved, just a quiet opportunity for him to settle down.
Oh, this is why George always gets his food first. George, let's focus, baby. Let's focus. Yeah, good boy. George, can you give me a spin? Can you give me a spin, buddy? Give me a spin. Come on. Oh, honey, no.
One of the most important lessons George taught me was that positive behavior should be rewarded, while negative behavior should not be fueled by emotional reactions. Because his separation anxiety was so severe, I worked closely with my veterinarian throughout the process. Eventually, we decided to try medication, and it made a noticeable difference. Gradually, George became calmer, more stable, and easier to manage. Nearly 2 years later, the transformation has been remarkable. He's affectionate with my daughters, enjoys spending time with them, and is far more relaxed than he was when he first arrived. I also trained him to wear a harness and accompany me outdoors. Today, taking walks together has become a regular part of our routine. As his confidence grew, he stopped associating my jacket exclusively with my departure, which significantly reduced many of his aggressive responses. Another surprising discovery was how gentle he could be with smaller animals. Whenever I foster kittens, George interacts with them calmly and patiently. Experiences like these reinforced my belief that animals respond to the quality of engagement they receive. The more understanding and attention you offer them, the more they often give in return. George is a Bengal cat, a breed known for its striking appearance. One of their unique characteristics is a shimmering effect in their coat that catches the sunlight and creates an almost sparkling appearance. Today, George is socialized enough that strangers can safely approach and pet him during our walks, something I never would have imagined when I first brought him home. Caring for difficult animals has always felt like a calling to me. I often find myself drawn to the animals that others consider too challenging, too damaged, or too much work. George certainly tested my patience. Over the years, he destroyed furniture, rugs, household items, and more. Yet those challenges taught me an important lesson. True acceptance means allowing an animal to be who they are rather than expecting them to become something else. One of George's greatest joys remains delightfully simple: tearing apart cardboard boxes. The smaller the box, the better. For anyone considering adopting an animal with behavioral difficulties, it is important to understand that progress rarely happens quickly. Fear, anxiety, and abandonment-related trauma can take months or even years to overcome. Patience, commitment, and a willingness to understand an animal's individual needs are far more important than achieving perfection. In the end, the animals that demand the greatest patience often become the ones that teach us the most about compassion, consistency, resilience, and trust.